Cameron Todd Willingham was put to death by lethal injection by the state of Texas on February 17, 2004. They said he set the fire that killed his 3 little daughters in Corsicana, Texas, 2 days before Christmas in 1991, a fire he escaped from.
There is smoke damage in this room. There is some heat damage in this room.
Here, in a video taken a few days after that fire, investigators walk through the house, trying to figure out what happened.
This is the bed where the 2-year-old was found in the middle of the bed.
They looked for clues they thought the fire left behind, and those clues, they decided, meant only one thing. The fire was deliberately set, and Todd Willingham was the man who set it. Doug Fogg was one of those arson investigators.
You remain very confident.
Oh, yeah.
That this was arson.
Totally.
But that conclusion is now widely acknowledged by top fire investigators and scientists throughout the country to be deeply flawed.
Do you believe that the state of Texas executed an innocent man?
I do.
David Gran is a reporter for The New Yorker magazine. His recent story showed in damning detail that the investigative techniques used to send Todd Willingham to his death have now been discredited by modern science.
This fire has now been examined multiple times by separate of the leading fire investigators in the country. Each one has concluded that there is absolutely no evidence of arson or that a crime ever occurred.
Last month, an official report to the Texas Forensic Science Commission, a state panel reviewing the Willingham case, blasted the arson investigation as nothing more than a collection of personal beliefs that have nothing to do with science-based fire investigation. And even the original prosecutor in the trial admits the foundation of his case that arson killed those children is now undermined.
You would agree that this report from the Texas Forensic Science Commission calls into very serious question the methodology and the way this arson investigation.
Without question.
That it really has a problem.
That the techniques used were flawed.
Deeply.
Yes.
But John Jackson still insists he sent a guilty man to the death chamber.
Some of the evidence is certainly less credible than I would have liked to see.
And doesn't that give you pause at all about sending a man to death?
Not a man like Todd.
A man like Todd. Todd Willingham was certainly a man from the wrong side of the tracks, a man with a criminal record, mostly drug offenses and a robbery. His wife Stacy said Todd had beaten her, including when she was pregnant. To the prosecutor, that history of spousal abuse was key.
The best evidence to me is not the investigation of the arson. The best evidence that I believe I presented was the prior attempts of Todd Willingham to kill his children.
He beat his wife when she was pregnant, therefore he killed his children in the fire.
I think that's a major factor that most finders of fact, such as jurors, would consider.
Todd's wife, Stacy, specifically denied Jackson's argument in the trial and insisted her husband, while violent towards her, would never have hurt their children. Stacy declined our request for an interview through a family member.
We don't execute people who beat their wives. And the only question that matters in this case is, did Cameron Todd Willingham set a fire on December 23rd, 1991, that burned down his house and killed his 3 children?
So it comes back to the fire. Doug Fogg and Manuel Vasquez made this diagram showing where the floor was charred, where flames were seen bursting out of the windows, where there were brown rings on the concrete porch. It all looked very suspicious.
I have no doubt that the fire was deliberately set.
What's the best evidence for that?
The elimination of the accidental causes. We found the liquid accelerant.
That's right. Lab tests showed the presence of a flammable liquid on the porch, near where the family kept a barbecue grill and lighter fluid. But all other tests throughout the home showed nothing suspicious. Nevertheless, Fogg decided Todd Willingham had lit a fire at the front door, blocking rescue attempts, and the fire had followed a trail of liquid accelerant he had poured through the hall and into the children's bedroom, where they were sleeping, and where the floor was badly charred in what the investigators determined were pore patterns.
I am very convinced of what I saw, what I did, and that I didn't make mistakes.
All these indicators are simply based on folklore. They're old wives' tales. There's no scientific basis for them.
Since the Willingham fire in 1991, there has been a revolution in the scientific understanding and analysis of fires. Gerald Hurst is one of the pioneers of that revolution and one of the many leading modern fire analysts who have looked at the Willingham case.
This is just a typical fire.
Typical fire, yes.
He was executed for arson for the murder of his daughters.
That's right, he was, because the people who investigated the fire did not understand the behavior of fire.
The fire investigators in this case were convinced they had evidence of arson. The floor was suspiciously charred.
This led them to believe that Cameron Todd Willingham had poured an accelerant, some type of gasoline or charcoal lighter fluid on the floor, and that the fire kind of burned in these areas, which reflects these patterns.
That's what arson investigators always used to believe, but no more. Since the Willingham fire, scientists have performed rigorous tests, like this one in Oakland, to explore what really happens in fires. When the heat builds up in a room, when it reaches a certain temperature, everything just ignites, and the floor burns.
Hot gases bank down, and that radiation is enough to ignite flooring materials and baseboards. And it not only ignites them, but accelerates their burning.
And so today, scientists know that all the so-called telltale signs of arson in the Willingham case and many others, those pore patterns of floor charring, for instance, they all occur naturally in fires.
The proof that they used for arson in here is in the report and in the testimony, and that is not proof. So yeah, Willingham was innocent. He was innocent if for no other reason, because nobody ever showed any form of proof that this was an arson.
But to Doug Fogg, the original fire investigator, the science does not matter.
And they're going to take it to these labs and they're going to blah, 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 and try to disapprove it. Well, I'll take it to the lab and disapprove it. But come to the real world sometime. Go out and let the beast get a hold of it.
So, was it an accidental fire, or was it, as prosecutors say, a killing driven by devil worship?